We respect and recognize the First Nations within whose unceded lands the village of Kaslo is situated, including the Ktunaxa, the Snipes, and Silks people, and the Indigenous and Métis residents of our community. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda for the April? Moved by Councillor Bird, moved by Councillor Leafwood. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. And adoption of the minutes from the March 25th meeting, if there are no errors or omissions. Moved by Councillor Leafwood, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. So now we will go into in camera. So the recommendation is that in accordance with section 91A, part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following: the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land, improvements. If the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality, and the receipt of advice is subject to solicitor client communications necessary for that purpose. Negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at the preliminary stages, and that in the view of council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public, and that persons other than council members and municipal officers be excluded from the meeting. Move that would be sweet. Moved by Councillor Leafwood and seconded by Councillor Bird. All those in favor? That's carried. All right. So we've just concluded our in-camera meeting, and we've done all the preliminaries, so we can jump right into our delegation from the Kaslo Housing Society. You can bring your chairs up to the table if you'd like. Yeah, and then well, let's just, so Councillor Lang, well, let's just do a test. Can you hear me just fine at the volume that I'm speaking?
Yeah, I can hear better now with the headphones.
Oh, okay. So Councillor Bird was the one that I had trouble hearing when I was virtual. Can you
say something?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to remember to project when I speak and not always look at the mayor and speak to the mayor. I need to be aware of the microphone right here.
Well, why don't you try and still project? If you're loud enough, then it shouldn't be a problem. So
you'd like me to recite some poetry?
A soliloquy. Yeah.
So how is that, Councillor Lang? We just want to make sure that you're being able to fully participate in the meeting.
It makes a huge difference if Erica speaks towards the mic.
Okay, all right. You'll just have to remember that she's speaking to the chair, but through the microphone. All right, well, welcome.
Thank you.
So we have received your correspondence, so you can
So as you know, we are hoping that we can get some assistance from the village in getting a down payment for the trailer park. We think that it's a pretty good investment for the price. It will keep the families that are there in affordable housing, and there is potential for 2 more lot rentals, which in fact there is one slated to be situated in August, and there's a manufactured home provider or builder that's wanting to put another home on site for a spec sale. We do have some interest from Columbia Basin Trust, their investment group. Are looking at perhaps helping us out. And if we can get that down payment, we can definitely afford the payments and the mortgage and, the upkeep in place. We've got a pretty thorough market case for it and business case for it, and it seems to work. The owner is very interested in keeping it affordable for the tenants that are there. You know, we don't want to see it just sort of parceled off and one trailer, one nice house, that sort of thing. So that's our plea.
All right, thank you. And actually, there's not any public online, but just for people who might be watching, could you just introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm Kathy Hansen with the Kaslo Housing Society, and I'm really new to this, and not used to speaking in public, so.
No, that's fine, just so people knew who you were.
Right.
Thank you. So are there any questions from council? Because we've got a copy of the correspondence. Questions? Councillor Leaflet.
To the chair. You mentioned the CBT, interest in investing. So would that be through a grant or through?
I'm not 100% sure yet. There's their investment group. I should have made better notes. But they're not here.
Impact Investment Fund, it could be.
Investment team. They couldn't support our request through the housing initiative program, but there's an investment team that might be interested in discussing with us, you know. So we've got, you know, $15,000 of our own money already tied up, potentially more, but for right now, $15,000 is what we've got, and that's, we'll say 10% of the way there.
All right, did you have a supplemental?
To the chair, so their interest, would that be if the village or some other partnered with you?
Initially, that is what they said, because they were approached several months ago, and they said, if you could show that there was another partner, potentially the village or the regional district, that would make it a bit more likable to them. It would be a better presentation to them to consider funding it in a larger scale. So they do want to see us with somebody with us, so some partnership of some sort.
Okay.
Any other questions? Right, Councillor Lang, did you have any questions? No.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just I would be over the moon. I just want to say there's a waiting list of 30-ish people, and we keep getting inquiries. I just checked my emails, and this year there's already 3 more people interested in renting at Penny Lane and 0 vacancies. And a lot of these people are local people or have connections to somebody within the village. So these are all, you know, family, friends, people who live here.
Councillor Brown?
Through the chair. For clarification, would these homes be used to continue housing the people within them, or would they be able to expand? If there's 30 people on a wait list, would some of these people be able to be served by these homes, or would it be mostly about keeping the people who are there in those homes?
Our initial plan would be to keep the trailer park with the people that are in it. In the future, but potentially once the sewer gets there, this we couldn't expand much with what we've got right there for septic. But in the future, we're looking at, you know, 5 to 8 years down the road, we could potentially rearrange things to have a larger structure and more units, like another similar situation as Penny Lane. We could build more affordable housing and house more people through that.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, my question has to do with why should a nonprofit buy this trailer park? Why should the Kaslo Housing Society buy this trailer park? Why not just allow it? Why not just, okay, we've got enough going on, should we just let it go to the open market? What would be the downside of a not-for-profit not buying it if it were to be a new commercial owner?
Well, we see that, if it were a commercial owner, then it could get, used, like I say, for a house on one end for someone to have a big grand yard and a trailer just to keep it as a mobile home park. We want to keep those people there in their home where they're comfortable, where they're safe and they're happy. If it were sold on the open market to someone who wasn't already doing what we're doing, there is potential these people could lose their homes. Big cities do it all the time. Mobile home parks are just getting torn out. People are left with their trailer, their mobile home with nowhere to put it because somebody's bought up the property for a different use. It might be a commercial venture or whatever. But this is a good way to keep affordable homes in the community. It's a really good, solid investment for the pittance of the price of the asking price for the land. And we could keep it affordable the same way we've been able to keep Hill Lane going, and we have a record there. We have a proven track record. So there's no profit motive there. There's also no motive to build a big fancy house on 13 lots. So we keep these homes for people in town.
Councillor Leakley?
So the current trailers that are there, are they all privately owned?
I believe they are.
So you're basically just purchasing the land.
We're purchasing the land and we're landlords renting out the trailer pads. And
So the CBT has land acquisition grant, so that wouldn't work in this case.
I'm not sure if that has actually been looked at. I think initially it was the housing initiatives, and then we're going to go look at other funding. But they don't. There's a lot of places that won't even look at trailers because they're not considered permanent homes. But I'm sure there's lots of places out there that we could look at. And we're still working with CBT and looking at other options.
Thank you. Any other questions for our delegation? All right. Thanks very much, Kathy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, so we'll yeah, you can stay for the rest of the meeting if you like, or you could take a moment. We'll give you a moment to step out if you would choose not to stay. That's understandable. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night. The report. So I provided my written report with a couple of attachments regarding the hospital district meeting that I attended. Are there any questions? Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, I do like the long reports.
Okay.
That doesn't bother me at all. I appreciate it. I did notice with the West Kootenay Boundary Regional Hospital District update report that there is no mention of what was promised a year and maybe more ago about a dialysis clinic. Like I see no movement on that front whatsoever in this. I'm sure it would show up in capital because they'd have to do some reorg of the hospital to make this clinic, but haven't heard anything and I, yeah, wondered if you had.
So, that clinic was going to be more of a City of Nelson thing. It wasn't an interior health initiated item. That was something that was mentioned by the director from Nelson, that they were investigating that, and IH was perhaps looking at partnering with them on that to make it work, but they weren't the ones who were going to build it. It wasn't going to be, I remember asking at that meeting, you know, if you can do that, why can't you have it in the hospital where there is medical assistance? But they wouldn't. If somebody else was taking on the liability, it sounded like they were fine with it, but not if they were the ones responsible. So it will not show up probably unless there is a complete change in the way they're doing things. Councilor Weaver. And I appreciate that you actually read that. I had that at the top of my report and I put it at the bottom of my report and thought, we'll see if anybody reads it, because I do take a lot of time going into preparing these reports, and if they're not seen as valuable by members of council, then, you know, it feels like I give up a lot of my time to attend the meetings and then to prepare hours and hours to prepare the reports. So sometimes I know I make spelling mistakes. I get too tired and then I look at it after and I think, oh no. Councilor Leaflet.
Through the chair. You mentioned in the FCM report about conversations about the tariff.
Yeah, I can't go into much detail on those. I'm not part of those discussions, but there are border mayors on either side who are having discussions with their counterparts on the other side of the line, and today was my first meeting on the election readiness working group, or what is affectionately known as earwig, which is odd, but it's a committee that was formed to come up with pre-election platforms, and then in the first 100 days after election, just to ensure that whoever is the sitting governments is afterwards are partnering with FCM and listening to municipal and local governments as to what their needs are. And so it's talking to candidates. And I actually did have a meeting with one of the candidates on Sunday afternoon. They agreed to meet with me separately and put forward the platform for FCM. So details, no, go to the FCM website. They've got some videos of our current president, who is Rebecca Bly from Vancouver. So she's done a lot of the advocacy work, and as you know, the mayor, you know, the executive team for FCM, as well as mayors of different, the big city mayors. They are doing their own advocacy as well for FCM, and so yeah. Okay. Thanks. You're welcome. Councilor, did you have a question? No. Yeah.
Through the chair, I was interested in discussions that revolved around the potential for a rural municipal growth framework. Can you give us a clue as to what that phrase means to the people that were in the discussion?
That's been something that's been our platform for the last several years, and it's more how related to housing, right? And what communities need in order to thrive. And a big part of that is guaranteed funding that isn't like the Canada Community Building Fund, where it's not a competition-based thing, and communities decide. They get the money and they can decide where it best works for them to spend it, because not all communities are built the same. So that's part of it. And, you know, how can we work together to deliver on housing and healthcare, and how we can support each other as different orders of government, whether it's the municipal, the local government, the provincial government, the federal government. And it's just getting all of the three orders of government working together and recognizing there's only one taxpayer, and we all want what's best for the residents of our country. And because we're so different, because we've got some very northern residents, and we've got southern residents, we've got people from big cities and very, very rural areas, including regional districts and the small communities within them. So it's just getting everybody pulling together. There's many parts to the municipal growth framework. Anybody could go on to the FCM site and see what their platform is and just Google municipal growth framework. Councillor Leawood?
Thank you, the chair. I just wonder if there's any discussions at the table, the RDCK table, about the fair. I know it's like,
Yes, there has been, and we've got the directors whose areas are directly impacted by the lack of service. But then we also have directors who are, their former life, they were on the other side of the fence, and so to speak, and dealing with labor disputes. And when you step in a labor dispute, when is it appropriate to do that and to apply political pressure? Probably a good thing that Vince Reddy is still able to step in and do some negotiating, and hopefully something will resolve. But I feel for the communities that are so severely impacted, but there's very little we could do as a regional government other than say, we want you to settle for the residents and the businesses, because they're getting really, really severely impacted by this. Thank you. I really appreciate the questions. Thank you. Are there any reports from council on any of their activities? Anything upcoming that you wanted to report on, Councillor Leaflet?
the fair is happening on Saturday.
So do we want to?
Oh, wait,
because we've got our events committee minutes are the next item.
Oh, wait.
After council reports, if there's council reports, and we will. Oh, I couldn't see your hand behind.
Through the chair, I was just thinking that Councillor Brown, isn't the Community Forest AGM coming up?
Just gonna bring that up. So
Oh,
the
okay.
Annual general meeting for the community forest will be held on Thursday, April 24th at 7 p.m. at JV Humphreys School. And if you'd like some more details, you can visit the KasloCommunityForest.org. And there's a page there that'll be about the AGM and have more information there.
Unfortunately, that's when we're in
I know.
APBLG. That happened last year. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Every year.
Yeah. Well, and I know you've gone many times because we've been there together at many AGMs for the community forums.
Not last year.
2 years ago.
Yeah. All right. Hey, did you have a report, Councillor Lang? Nope. All right. So now, committee meeting minutes, events committee.
Okay. So the volunteer fair is happening on Saturday at 1 o'clock. We've got about 19 organizations that have signed up. And we're inviting them to come at 12 and they can set up their displays, and then the public can come between 1 and 4. And then after, we will have dinner for those volunteer organizations that have registered and signed up. And yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about how much people appreciate, organizations appreciate that this is happening, and a chance to show newcomers and other people like exactly what their organization does, maybe get more members. I think some organizations will sell memberships, and yeah, so hopefully it'll be good for the first one, and we're asking for feedback for, you know, hopefully we'll be able to do it one more time before the term is up, and people can give us feedback to how to improve it. And yeah, so
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. And spread the word that, because getting the organizations to sign up is the smaller part of it. It's
Yeah.
getting people in there to interact and learn about all the great organizations that we do have in our community and how they might be able to contribute to the richness of what makes Kaslo Kaslo. All right, and so we'll move on to the CAO report.
Let's, couple of things to note with respect to delegation requests we received. So there was quite a few actually in the last week, and they'll be scheduled over the next 4 to 6 weeks here. One of them was about proposing that the village purchase private land and dedicate it as a park, and that was at the lands that have become known as South Beach. So notwithstanding its relation to the proposed RV park, it's really just about buying private land and dedicating it as a park, which didn't seem to be aligned with any of council's current priorities. And it's not related to a business item that's on the agenda, so staff declined their request to be a delegation. I've had a bit of conversation with their group through the weekend to try to help them understand why it was declined. And so the information related to their delegation request is included as an information item. So it's something that council is interested in, and direction can be given to staff to schedule the delegation for a future meeting. Just thought it'd be important for council to understand why it was declined. And then another delegation request was received for the April 22nd meeting, and that related to concerns they have with the OCP and zoning and information that might not have been relayed to council throughout the entire process, and also relates to the RV park proposal. So both of those were declined for the same reasons, and council can give direction to staff on either one of those if they do want them to appear as a delegation. And another note that's not on your printed scale report there is related to the AKVLG conference or convention that's coming up at the end of April. There is a pre-conference workshop on the Thursday, and it's related to the cost of infrastructure. And there's a few presenters. One of them works with the city of Cranbrook, and the others are a communications expert, and et cetera, et cetera. But given that it's a topic that Kaslo's council is currently dealing with, you might consider attending that workshop. I believe it's only $75 for the day and could be worth your time. So just thought I'd make sure council is well aware there is an opportunity there for some education. And it's not too late to register. Update on some buildings. We have the Kemble Memorial Center, and there's a tenant, Pennywise. They are going to be terminating their lease, and perhaps more importantly, it's worth noting that their last publication was yesterday. So that'll have an impact on the village's ability to reach the public with its notices, etc. So worth noting. Janitorial services. There's currently an invitation to quote on our website for janitorial services related to City Hall, Public Works, Park Buildings, Temple Building. And so that invitation to quote will close on April 14th and then be awarded. And just wanted council to be aware that that's out there. Finance, council can expect a first quarter report at its next meeting. Personnel, couple of updates for you. You know, we have a temporary laborer position that was posted and we've closed it because the incumbent has returned to work. And fire smart coordinator position remains open. Staff have had discussions with the RDCK on how we might collaborate in 2025, whether we have a fire smart coordinator in place or not. So it's on staff's radar to make sure we keep moving along with our fire smart efforts. And the director of finance and corporate services position remains open. It's been about a month, and staff will be reviewing applications, and if needed, we'll post the position again. Planning and development, you'll recall we chatted about the ideas fair and stakeholder meetings with respect to South Kaslo development plan. So we are going to reschedule those two events, as well as council's meeting with the consultants because of some scheduling conflicts. So stay tuned for some new dates. It's looking like somewhere in the middle of May is when we might reschedule things too. Transportation and transit services. We had an open house for our active transportation network plan that occurred on April 1st. And information from that will help form part of the active transportation network plan, as well as public surveys that are available. If the council has any feedback on the plan, then it would be asked that that information be given to staff this week. And somewhere around the end of April, we'll have a presentation for council with the final document. Spring cleanup, street sweeping is complete, and the week of April 28th, we'll be doing yard waste pickup. Public notices have been issued. We are hoping for a paving project this year, and so proactively, we've taken a survey of our gravel pit to see what kind of material we have available, and might need to expand the gravel pit in future years if it looks like we're getting low. The water utility, we are planning on doing a water main leak repair in South Kaslo over at the riding club grounds the week of April 14th. So there could be service interruption. Notices will be issued to residents in South Kaslo. And my favorite thing to report on is that we planted 13 new trees in town, the hospital, A Avenue, and 2nd Street, and staff took the liberty of promoting that on our social media so the public can see the good work we're doing.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Baker. Are there any questions? Councilor Brown?
Through the chair, in terms of the delegation requests, it stated that council procedure bylaw allows a delegation if there's subjects related to a business item. So the agenda doesn't come out till Friday, but a delegation would have to ask to be a delegation by Tuesday. So I'm just wondering how that would be practicable if we don't find out what the agenda is until the date that it would need to request a delegation is already passed.
So, well, they have to, there's procedures for submitting for a delegation request with the deadlines within it.
But how would they know what the, if I understand this correctly, we're saying what your delegation is about isn't on the agenda. So we aren't going to give you a delegation, but the agenda comes out on a Friday before the Tuesday meeting, whereas the previous Tuesday, they're required to have said, we would like a delegation without access to what the agenda will be. So how would they know what's on the agenda in order to be able to say this is the appropriate meeting to ask for a delegation? By the time they know, it's too late to ask for a delegation, right? Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly.
Now I get it. But think what would happen is they might just not get the meeting that they desire. Like if they chose, I want to come to this meeting and there wasn't anything, but staff could indicate that perhaps there was an upcoming item, maybe timing wise, we don't have anything on the agenda for that meeting and they might have to wait because they don't, if everybody picked the same meeting, we can only accommodate a certain number of delegations per meeting. And I think for this one in particular, we already had 2 delegations lined up, but I'll let the CEO Baker expand on that if there's anything further.
Mayor Hewitt, so your Councilor Brown's correct. Possible to know what's on the upcoming agenda. And Mayor Hewitt's also correct in that staff can then schedule them for a meeting in which the topic is a business item. So that is how we would typically get around it. More generally speaking, the procedures bylaw is at the discretion of council. If council would like it reviewed, perhaps make it easier for delegations or presentations to occur and not be as restrictive, or perhaps put rules in place on, there's some municipalities that will not allow a delegation to speak on a business item of that agenda. It's not allowed. In Kaslo, that's the only time that you're allowed to come and be a delegation. And so it's completely up to council on what you want your rules to be for delegations. Council and staff can go away and review it and try to find some best practices and come back to council if you'd like to make some changes. That would be my only commentary.
Go ahead.
So if I understand that correctly, this was not accepted because we aren't talking about that land or any of the right of ways or anything at this time. So would it be correct then to assume that when the agenda items do include a land transfer or anything that would include those right of ways, at that time they would be invited to be a delegation, as that would then be something that would be on the agenda?
Through the chair, the way that staff, try to vet these requests, it's not simply, oh, it's a topic on the agenda, so please come speak about it. There's other things to consider, like, is this something that is within council's jurisdiction? Typically it is. Is this something that is on council's strategic priorities? Or does staff have the sense that this is something council is interested in and would help influence their decisions in some way? And sometimes it's clearly no. Staff just have a sense that this is not something council needs to see a presentation or have a delegation on. And if it's a unknown or a gray area, then staff chat with the mayor to get a sense from an elected official perspective on, is this something that the mayor thinks council is keen on hearing about? So the reason I mentioned all of this is to say it's not black and white deciding when and how to schedule a delegation.
Councillor
Chair, just a little background on delegations. We didn't used to have that procedure that it would have to be an item on the agenda in order for the delegation to be accepted. We used to do it the other way, and it was really hard as councillors to have an agenda where we have specific topics that we've read about and talked about, and then someone comes with a delegation that has absolutely nothing to do with is currently, what we're, on our strategic priority list or what we're talking about. So we changed it at that time. You were on council then, to say that it needed to be an item that was on the agenda or something that we were kind of considering at the time. And it really made the meetings easier to streamline and get through.
Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, when if there's a requirement that it be a business item, my understanding of that is that a delegation should not just be for information purposes, but if there's a business item on the agenda, then there's a question that council needs to ask, basically a request built into the delegation. With, unlike the, when we get a delegation from the RCMP, it's strictly for information and it's not a business item. So that is the exception of this policy, or?
Through the chair, Councilor Birds is touching on things that staff struggle with when reading our bylaw. And it's a great example of the RCMP. They're not necessarily providing a report. It's not a business item, but they are appearing. And what I would say is there's a difference between a delegation and a presentation. And our procedures bylaw does not talk about presentations, and perhaps it should. So it kind of goes back to this, an item that's referenced in council strategic priorities that you're well aware of, is that our bylaws should be reviewed periodically, and the council procedures bylaw is one in particular that might be worth reviewing to allow presentations, rather than us scheduling things like the RCMP and it not necessarily fitting a mold for everything else.
I'll just respond to the RCMP when we do get the report that it becomes it is an agenda item. And then sometimes we've held that report back until the RCMP are available. And, you know, if council does not think that there's any value in getting firsthand, rather than just from a piece of paper from the delegation from the RCMP, then we can instruct staff to just put the report on. But I found it valuable to have that back and forth and get a sense as to, you know, this is going down a rabbit hole, but in that instance, to get that back and forth with the local detachment staff to see how things are going in the community. So I'll go to you, Councillor.
Madam Chair. This is another little bit of history. When municipalities started to become more responsible for our CMP staffing, and one of the things that they came to us and asked is, what would you like to see? And that is, you know, at the time, we as a council said, we would like to have you come to council meetings and give us a report so we can ask questions about, you know, what's happening in our community. And they, you know, they would come and ask if there was ways we could support them or they could support us. So we did ask for them to provide those for us.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, perhaps then, because I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe Councillor Bird would say that there's not value in that happening, but rather perhaps we should look at how we would allow presentations as well as delegations, so that it would fit within what the rules around it all are, because there is undeniable huge value to us being able to communicate with them in person. So.
And back to the CAO's report, there was an email, I know several of us were at work earlier, but there was an email from the manager of strategic initiatives with a different date that was chosen, Monday, May 12th. So, and I spoke to him just before this meeting, and so he'd like to get a sense from council. So if you could look at your email, there were some other dates proposed just for the council portion of it. But Monday, May 12th was proposed for the stakeholder meetings and the what did you call the ideas fair.
Is there a time?
4 o'clock for the ideas, and then 6 o'clock, I think it was, for the open house 16. Councillor Ruth.
Through the chair, I will be working on Mondays starting in 2 weeks, Monday through Friday. So I'm only off on Saturday and Sunday.
Okay.
So any weekday meetings have to be after 6 o'clock in order for me to be able to attend. I would be very happy to do a Sunday. I've been on committee of the whole on Sundays before. If it would be possible, this is a really important one for me. I really want to be there. So if it could be after 6 p.m. if it's during the week or on the weekends, then I really appreciate that.
So the Ideas Fair is 6 p.m. So, and it's stakeholders, I think it's individual organizations that they're touching base with. It's not like the council has to attend that. Is that correct?
Yeah, one meeting with various stakeholders,
Okay.
and that would be before the Ideas Fair. And then we're trying to figure out when to have a consultant get to meet with council. And I think there's gonna be a challenge because they're gonna be here for one day and the Ideas Fair is gonna be at 6 o'clock. So I don't know if there's gonna be an opportunity to meet with council as well, in person for everyone.
So I know that I responded and Councillor Bird responded and, were you going to be back in town on May 12th, Councillor Lang? Because our manager of strategic initiatives needs to give the consultants an idea of whether the majority of council will be able to be in attendance.
May 12th,
Yes.
I will be in Kaslo.
Okay. So tentatively put that in, that was the only date that was provided for that portion of it. So if you could put that in your calendar, and Councillor Leafwood, just so we can, CAO Baker can give the indication to.
Yeah, May 12th is fine in the afternoon.
Okay, and evening.
Yeah.
Okay, so just the afternoon portion doesn't work for you, but the evening would, the 6 p.m.
I could go right from work at 6 p.m.
All right, so that sounds like it is workable. All right, any other questions for the CAO on his report before we move on to the next agenda item? Right, so then we've got items of correspondence, and so a couple of incoming items and a couple of the outgoing items, and then the grant approval for the Kootenai Lake testing for ground infiltrated wastewater. Any questions for staff on Councillor Brown?
To the chair, I'd like to pull the correspondence from Jim Holland, please, for discussion.
Okay, did you have a resolution or just a discussion?
I have a discussion that could lead to a resolution.
All right. Well, I'll allow the discussion, but I think because if you're proposing a resolution, it hasn't been submitted in advance for staff to review. So we can refer that to the next meeting as a notice of motion.
There's no resolution, it's just discussion.
Okay.
To the chair.
Go ahead.
As we've noted, that public access to South Beach currently doesn't exist, and that's a big thing that we were looking at when we were considering a land transfer to ensure public access to South Beach. I believe the aspect of Mr. Holland's proposal on using right-of-ways to create access without a land transfer might be relevant information for council to consider. As we have been asked to do a land transfer, and in the future that may be something that comes up again. And this is village-owned land, and we have identified that access to South Beach that's public, not through the private property, is a important thing to council. I could see how specifically that aspect of his request would be relevant information for a delegation. That's the point I would like to raise, I suppose, from what his correspondence was. I think that would be deserving of a delegation to talk about how we may possibly use village-owned land to provide access to the community to the beach.
Gail Baker, do you have any comment? Reading the correspondence, there really wasn't anything new. Right, because we knew we had the rights of way. So it's not new information, because it was on our own maps to begin with, which they're using to make the case. So it is now in their correspondence, in their words. That's my feeling, is that it's not new information that's being presented to council. It's something that council has been aware of the entire time. But the request for us, if you're meaning the request for us to develop those into access points. Go ahead.
So a supplemental, in response. I believe at the time, our understanding was that these right-of-ways were not sufficient or usable to build access. They were steep, there were all sorts of concerns that we had, and the perception that I understood was that that isn't practicable. And my understanding is that they brought in people who are some of the most knowledgeable people in mapping and trail building in our community, and they have been able to identify an area where a trail would actually be feasible. So that is new information that we didn't before have, because the understanding before was that this was not something that was possible. And now there's information that this may perhaps be possible. So to me, that seems like new information. And it also seems like it is addressing an issue that we have identified of access, legal access without people trespassing. My perception.
Through the chair? Yeah, that was the one aspect of this letter that I thought was the map that was provided doesn't help me at all, because it's the old map from 1891. Anyway, it does. I would appreciate hearing more about these access. What do you call them? Sorry, like basically trails, like access infrastructure units. And sorry, there's a word for this and I'm missing it. Partly because this is where I feel like with our active transportation plan is not all that exciting to me, because it doesn't really talk about how to connect our community, the village of Kaslo within our borders, how it can connect possibly potentially regionally. And this is I have a feeling that the people that are looking into these kind of access structures, that's the word I'm looking for, those access structures are also like concerned about connecting Kaslo regionally. And I think that's a really worthy endeavor, and I wouldn't mind a better explanation that goes beyond the words here. Clearly there is some mapping that is not part of this letter that I would like to see as well.
Any response, CEO Baker?
Mayor, maybe just couple things. The council would like one of these delegations that we're talked about to be invited, then perhaps council can let staff know what they want them to be invited to talk about specifically, because I don't know if what council is asking is what they were planning on presenting. I think a resolution should be passed clearly stating what you want them to come here and talk about. And then my other thoughts to it are, if council's in the middle of negotiating a purchase and sale agreement, and so if council is still interested in working towards that negotiation, then it's somewhat irrelevant what these paths are. If that negotiation ceases and you're council's not gonna pursue a land transaction, well, then it might make sense to look at these alternative options and explore them past. So I just want council to make sure they're not confusing themselves or misleading the community in some way in having these two potentially competing priorities on the table.
Councillor Brown.
To the chair. So my understanding is at this time, we have denied the plan as presented. So we are not in negotiations at this moment until a plan is presented to us and we talk about it in an open meeting. So this seems to be a pause at this moment while we rethink. You know, the developer rethinks what, with, you know, in consideration of what council has said, what they may be willing to change if they want to resubmit something. And the community is also now aware that we have these right of ways and that they might be a solution to some of the stated, you know, goals of council, like creating public access. So I wouldn't say that this is necessarily competing at this time. I'd say that this moment between, or assuming that we get another proposal, that this would be a moment between proposals in which we could accept proposals from community members who own the land and have an idea of how they would like to see it used and how it might be able to address concerns that council stated. So I don't see it as being competing with it. I see it as being in addition to it.
Okay, so then what you'd like is for staff to consider when would be an appropriate meeting for both to come, or just Mr. Holland, because his is the one that was dealing with the access trails. So we'll let staff take that away and figure out which meeting is the most appropriate. Because I understand we've got staff has to work on budget for meeting next week, and so
And also, what specifically
the issue.
are they coming to talk
Right.
to us?
Right. Do we have clarity on that, or is that your interpretation of what the delegation was about? Because it was wasn't really specific. It was mostly math.
So through the chair, I think it is important that we're really clear with them what it is, because there were aspects of the letter suggesting that we purchase land that isn't for sale and do some things that aren't part of our strategic priorities. And that's not specifically what I would like him to speak about. The specific part of his correspondence that I'm interested in hearing about are the three options that they provided that would include, through the active transportation network and all these different things, provide access through village right of ways to South Beach. That's specifically those three plans or three aspects, maybe there are four, that he brought up. Those are specifically what I would like to learn more about, so that we would have that information when, if and when you were to ever consider another land transfer, we would know, were there an alternate way for the public to access the beach separate of a land transfer. So narrowly focus on that aspect.
So, would you like that as a motion then? Because this was already a delegation that was denied, or would you prefer it as a motion to have you coordinate a meeting for them to come and speak on that specific issue?
I think a motion would make good sense.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion?
You had mentioned something about land that people own that would provide access with each trail. Okay, I must have misheard you then, because the only land in that spot is either village owned or owned by the developer, right? Okay.
And think that's what you were referring to, as village land is citizens' land.
Oh, okay,
Right, yeah.
okay.
All right, so the motion is moved and seconded to have staff coordinate a meeting for Jim Holland to come to present as a delegation. So all those in favor? And opposed? Did you want your negative vote recorded, Councillor Lang?
Yes, please.
Okay. So that motion passes. All right, that brings us to question period. So it's 8 p.m. and I'm going to be pretty strict on the 15 minutes, I guess it is, that we allow. But because we're already fairly late, there are, I believe, a few people online. Are there any questions from members of the public who are online? All right, so if you have questions, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. All right, I see no questions, so we'll move on with business. So our first item is the audited financial statements. If you want to see that at all, CEO Baker?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So just to give some context, the financial statements got a chance to review, and the information that's in there is then going to be used by staff to help form the draft 2025 budget that you'll receive next Tuesday, the special meeting. So the reserve balances, the accumulated surplus, all of that's critical information for staff. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation is that the 2024 audited financial statements be accepted. Moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Brown. Discussion? Councillor Leitwood.
The chair, do those get put on the website or just access through the agenda?
The chair, typically we include the financial statements within our annual municipal report.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. And Kaslo Housing Society, and what I'm going to recommend is that their request be referred to the next meeting, because they're making a financial request and we do not know where all of our reserve balances are sitting at, nor all our grant balances are with the projects, the capital projects that we've currently got. So if we can have that at this point referred to the what would be timing wise for staff to have enough time to bundle that information together, so we're making, if we're going to entertain the request, that we know we have money to do a lot.
Mayor Hewitt, I'd say next Tuesday, council's gonna have an opportunity to see the budget as a whole, and could then choose to raise this as a topic and potentially ask staff to include it. Over the next week, staff can think about it and be prepared to provide council with options next Tuesday.
That's the committee of the whole budget. Yeah. So refer it to the actual decision to the meeting on the 22nd, but it will be discussed or included for discussion on the 15th.
I'd say the discussion next Tuesday makes good sense. And then council could pass a resolution to include a grant or funding towards the housing society as part of its budget decisions, if that's what council's interested in.
But if it's a committee of the whole, we're not making,
Oh, that's fair.
right?
That's fair. So, nonetheless, though, a resolution could be passed and then, at the April 22nd meeting, council can pass the resolution.
So the recommendation is to refer this then to the April 15th budget meeting for consideration. Moved by Councillor Leafwood, seconded by Councillor Brown. Discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. All right, and then permissive tax exemption for the thrift store property. This is to consider granting a 10-year,
Oh,
sorry.
Again, the same reason.
So, Councillor Leafwood is the secretary for the Victorian Hospital Thrift Store. So she has removed herself from the discussion. So this is to consider granting a 10-year permissive tax exemption for the thrift store property. And the recommendation is that the property occupied by the thrift store be granted a permissive tax exemption for the years 2025 to 2034. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Councilor Leafwood?
Hardly got down the hallway. 2.4, which is the water and wastewater parcel tax bylaws. So the first recommendation is that the wastewater parcel tax bylaw number 1313/2025 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Lang. All those in favor? Is carried, and that the water parcel tax bylaw 1314/2025 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Leafwood. All those in favor? It's carried. And parcel tax roll review panel, this is in case it is needed. So recommendation that Mayor Hewitt and we need two other council members who are able to sit on that, and the meeting date by necessity is pretty limited to when it could be. So for April 28th at 4 p.m. So that would be, it's a Monday. Okay. And that's one of your first days that you're, okay. All right, so Councillor Leafwood and Councillor Lang, you're not back yet on the 28th of April. Okay, are you able to do that, Councillor Bird?
I have this niggling feeling there's something else on that day, but I can't find it, so I think I'm good. Or is that because there was a suggestion that we would do the south
Oh, the Ideas Fair thing.
yeah, the Ideas Fair, was that going to be on April 28th? That's maybe what's in my head that I
Oh, was it
And I-
potential for a council?
potential, and I didn't see it marked down. Okay, I'm
Okay.
pretty sure I'm free.
All right, so then that Mayor Hewitt, Councillors Leafwood and Bird be appointed to the parcel tax roll review panel, and further that the first sitting of the review panel be scheduled for 4 p.m. on April 28th at City Hall. And moved by Councillor Leafwood, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any further discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. And beer garden regulation. This is to consider whether the village's beer garden bylaw is necessary given the provincial framework for liquor licensing, and the recommendation is that a bylaw to repeal the Village of Kaslo Beer Garden Regulation Bylaw 1315, 2025. See third reading, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? This is after third reading, we can't make any changes. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And EDMA, Indigenous Engagement Requirements. So I'm gonna let CAO Baker speak to this before I read out the recommendation. Baker?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So council will recall that we were given $40,000 by the province last year for Indigenous engagement, and council passed a resolution not long ago to contribute 15,000 of that to the RDCK for collaboration. And shortly after, the province advised us that there's another $42,000 they'd like to give us for more Indigenous engagement. One of the reasons we only gave the regional district $15,000 of our previous funding was because we wanted to retain some for our own purposes. And the $25,000 that we retained is plenty for us to achieve what we're looking to achieve in the next year. And so it makes good sense that we take some of this additional funding being offered and provide that to the regional district so that they can fully implement what they had planned for in the way of regional collaboration. The end result, the regional district would have $40,000 to help support the village with its Indigenous engagement. The village would then have an additional $42,000 for all of its own initiatives. So there's a tremendous amount of money that's available, and staff don't believe it would harm the village to provide $40,000 to the regional district, under the caveat that at some point we need a real clear understanding of what value is going to be provided to the village. And in particular, staff have made note of council's interest in wanting to help build a relationship with Indigenous peoples, and that'll be kept in mind as the regional district comes to us with ideas on how they want this engagement to go. Thank you.
So the recommendation as it's written is that an additional 25,000 for a total of 40,000 be transferred to the RDCK for the purpose of pooling funds for Indigenous engagement requirements under the Emergency and Disaster Management Act. I want council to, I just want to throw that I would like us to consider having them articulate how they're going to involve the village in this, because the regional district gets their own 40, but the rest, the other 40 bunches of money are coming from municipalities. And I want to ensure, I think it's only fair for the village to request that we're built into their engagement plan, because it is our funding, and we don't want it's good for them to be undertaking the engagement, but it's not effective for us to not be included. It's good that we're getting additional funding, but for municipally related engagements. But this is a little different. If we're going to engage as an entire regional district, we're part of the regional district, so we should have some idea, and at least have them provide their engagement plan and how they might include not just our municipality, but all of them, because I think we need to know how we're going to be included in this. So we're furthering our efforts with engagement and reconciliation. So, Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, I'm in complete agreement with Mayor Hewitt. I also recall in our last meeting, the CAO had been speaking with the RDCK, and some of his concerns were also no longer perhaps there based on the communication that he had. So based on my understanding, at the CAO satisfaction of specifics around that engagement, that I would be comfortable with the CAO's judgment, and then with your additions, that would be sufficient to ensure that Kaslo is well represented in this and meaningfully part of it.
And I just did a bad thing. I didn't write that down for you. I spoke a lot of words and I didn't write down for you what I know.
If we recorded it, well, that would help.
So, Councillor Leaflet.
To the chair. I don't remember reading this, but was there a time frame for their engagement?
Through the chair, the only timeline I'm aware of is that they're looking to issue the RFP now and start engagement as soon as possible, but I think they need a consultant hired before they can lay it out over time. So I don't know in the long run what the timeline is.
Okay, so, I mean, the reason I'm asking that question is because, you know, we don't, like, we have done this before where we have given the RDCK money for global or regional initiatives, but we don't always hear back how those initiatives help us. So is there a way to build in there that every so many months, like once a year, we get a report as to how this is benefiting us? Even, I mean, we've decided to give them the money, but I still would like to know after it's started and the engagement has started and their plan, like after some point, did this really benefit the village? For future, like, ideas of other types of engagement. The other piece of that is in the money that we are keeping, are there any parameters around how we can spend that? I mean, we could develop our own plan, which I know is staff time, but part of our priorities are communication. So we could start developing our own plans for how to engage the Indigenous community at some point. Yeah. Number
So
one.
as far as the deadline, March 31st was the deadline for committing.
Okay,
It was supposed to be spent,
Right.
but because they hadn't finished with even rolling out EDMA, so you can't decide how to engage when you don't know
Right.
what EDMA's gonna look like.
Yeah.
But I think the commitment had to be there, so I think this satisfies that commitment. We've given them some, but now we're giving them the full amount. And then it was, the other 42, if there were any parameters around how to spend the money, right?
right, but I wasn't necessarily asking for the first piece of that. Like, after the plan has they've figured it out and they've hired a consultant, I want to know after a time limit of whatever, how this has been for the village. And I don't necessarily mean for this specific, like use of any kind of money, but we're often asked by the regional district to commit funds, but I sometimes never see the benefit. So as we move forward into the future and make these kind of decisions about sharing RDCK with the RDCK, is it really beneficial to us? So I want to see how these things work after a certain amount of time. You understand what I mean?
Through the chair, I understand completely, and I feel the exact same way. And maybe to go one step further, the regional district won't be spending any of that money unless it's on things that directly benefit the village of Kaslo. So staff will know what the money is being spent on, and it's either going to involve staff or members of the community or council. So if the money will be spent on Kaslo.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so for the recommendation, the additional 25,000 for a total of 40, and with the requirement that the village would like them to share their engagement plan and how they're going to involve the village of Kaslo in the Indigenous engagement that occurs as a result. Something to that effect. Is that okay? And then staff will put together from from the recording, but more eloquent words that, all right, so you were going to move that and, seconded by Councillor Leakwood. Any further discussion? And does that give you what you need?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so all those in favor? Motion is carried. And there's another recommendation that council be offered the opportunity to enroll in the Indigenous Canada Certificate Program through the University of Alberta, with fees paid for by the village with its Indigenous engagement requirements funding. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? Hey, Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, I noticed that there is a no fee option where you can just monitor the course, like take the course right through all 12 sections. And it's about a 2 to 3 hour a week commitment for 12 weeks at your own pace. And so it's an auditing a course, basically. And so I'm interested to do that. So I'm in favor of the resolution, but it won't cost anything from me anyway.
All right. Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, I am also interested in taking this. And I would be happy to do the free version as well, so that there's no cost to the taxpayer. I believe the paid version just provides you a certificate. Then I feel like the information and the knowledge is the most important part, not necessarily the paperwork at the end. So if there's a way to be able to do this for free and to gain that, then I would be very interested.
Did you have your hand up, Councillor Lang?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, so we'll leave the resolution as it is and then just have staff share the link, and then we could read the materials and see, you know, whether there is something more to be gained by actually going through the program, and we can choose. And because it would be covered through the funding received, so it's not. It would be furthering our engagement, but I don't have a sense as to what the cost is if you're paying for that program.
To the chairman, maybe $100. It's cheap,
Oh, okay.
and we need ways to spend our money.
Right.
So I would encourage you to get a certificate.
Okay, all right. So it's been moved and seconded and discussed. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's carried. All right, and 9.8, May days 2025, and the recommendation is that a grant and aid be provided to the Chamber of Commerce in the amount of $4,050 to cover the cost of facility rental fees and permits related to the 2025 May days event. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's carried, and that all the requests from the Chamber of Commerce identified in their letter to the village dated March 28, 2025 be granted. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Leakwood. Any discussion? All those in favor? That motion is carried. And 9.9, draft budget, operating enhancements and reserve funding.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So a couple items just to chat about in preparation for the 2025 draft budget that you'll get next Tuesday. So in looking at the operating budget, there's increases to the operating expenses that are necessary to maintain status quo. So things like 5.65% utility rate increases from Fortis, and 3% wages and salary increases, and 3% increases from materials and equipment from suppliers, just due to inflation and the price index. And there's council's benefits that were implemented about a year and a half or 2 years ago now. So in order to afford the benefits, we need to budget for it. So that's an enhancement, but it's not increasing service levels at all. Everything is same service level, but it probably eats up 6% or calls for a 6% general tax rate increase. And then there's things that council's asked for that are enhancements that are increasing the level of service. So there was a discussion about a month ago about adding, it was $2,000 towards community engagement and events. Put that in the budget. So there's some, I'm going to call them kind of discretionary increases or real enhancements to the service level, but the large bulk of what you're going to see is simply an increase that's necessary to maintain existing service levels. And so what staff would find really helpful, knowing that we only have 1 week in which to make any adjustments, is to have some idea of where council wants the general tax rate to land, so that staff can move things around and try to get you where you want to go with your draft budget and not have to make a ton of changes after next Tuesday. So if council can give some idea of a percent at this point, it would be helpful.
So can I ask you a question first? So at this point, the budget that you have developed is at about a 6%, 7% increase without basically any additional enhancements to service other than very minor. The other ones are all basically cost of living increases and increases that we can't really change.
Basically correct. I'd say it's at 7%.
Okay.
Is the budget that's drafted, including the true enhancements that council's asked for, plus maintaining this existing service level. The caveat here is we have a massive asset deficit. So I'm just careful to use the words maintain existing service level, because you need an extra $850,000 a year in order to maintain existing service levels. So you have a massive deficit. So I'm very cautious, or worried about the words I use. I don't want council to think, hey, a 6%, 7% increase and it's status quo. This is not. You're short $850,000. So I'd say 6% is I'd say 7% is the bare minimum that you can get away with, and you're still going to have the $850,000 a year deficit.
Councilor Brown.
Through the chair, were we to want to start to, not in a token way, but meaningfully address some of these deficits, what would be a percentage that you would recommend would help us to get on the right path?
104%.
I mean, it could be, but I'm.
Well, considering, okay.
Through the chair, thank you, Councilor Bird, for remembering. It's 104% tax increase.
Yeah.
Is what's necessary to maintain status quo truly. And so that's why council has to think hard about lease agreements, or we just approved a grant and aid for $4,000. That's $4,000 that could have come in the form of revenue, and it makes good sense that council has approved it. I'm not that, please don't get the sense that it wasn't a good idea, but it's $4,000 is a lot of money. Probably 0.5% of the budget. There's a $26,000 a year for that we budget for people who pay their utility fees early.
Right.
So if we didn't give them that early bird discount of $26,000, that must make up something like, I didn't get it wrong, that's probably like 5% of the budget. It's all these little things that start to add up.
Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, this is where I'd like a breakdown of how people are taxed. If I'm a homeowner and let's say I'm on the sewer system, so I'm paying my sewer fees, wastewater, I'm paying my water fees. I'm also paying to the school, to the RD hospital, like so what we're talking about now, when you say of the budget, are we strictly talking about this one line item in your tax bill? So if it goes up, say 10%, and my tax bill, because I'm a homeowner, like it's my only home, so I get that discount. And honestly, I haven't looked at a tax bill in a couple of years. I rent. So on an average property, let's call it 400, let's call it 500,000 even. That particular line item, if it goes up 6%, we are talking about affecting that particular homeowner for our budgetary purposes. How much? Like how, when you say 6%, if my tax bill is $2,000, tell me if I'm like totally out of whack here. Is that 6% on the whole $2,000, or it's only 6% on 500 of that $2,000?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
On the total, it would be 6% on the total.
So including all of the,
Oh, okay, so no, on the municipal portion.
yeah.
The
so
others will
municipal-
go up at they'll be whatever their rates of increase are.
So when
You
I'm
don't
saying,
control.
yeah, so if I'm saying my $2,000 with my homeowner grant is my total taxes.
Right.
Then the 6%, we're only talking about a portion of that total tax bill.
And I believe the municipal portion, when we looked at your pie chart, we were at about 40% of the total, 33 of the total.
A third, okay, that's helpful, that matters.
Yeah.
So.
Sure. But doesn't it also depend on the assessed value? So if your assessed value goes up, so then your taxes are more. But then the 6% increase doesn't always show us an increase in taxes, which I don't understand, but.
I guess through the chair, I guess what I'm trying to get at is what is the burden on the average taxpayer when you say 6% or 104%? Well, somewhere in there, but, or is that like impossible to determine? Like to give me an answer on that one that is of any value?
I think at this point, it's really hard to know because everybody's property values are different, right? So if you're thinking an average home is 500,000, but there's $1 million homes, there's, you know, highly unlikely there's a $200,000 home anymore, but and the assessed value does come into play. The average assessment increase in the village of Kaslo was about 3% this year, if I remember correctly. So if yours increased less than 3%, then your impact is going to be less. But if yours increased more than the average, then your taxes will go up higher than somebody who's maintained the status quo. So it all works together. It's really hard to, I think, well, it wouldn't be fair to ask staff to do that right now, but even next week, it'll be hard to apply give you a number.
Madam Chair, if I might just suggest, if you're curious to learn more about that, the BC assessment website is fabulous and has videos with cartoons and explain it in a way that a teenager could understand. And I strongly encourage council to check out their website and look at their videos to understand how the taxation or how assessment and then our tax rates all work together.
I haven't heard from Councillor Brown yet on this, so I'll go to Councillor Brown, and then if Councillor Lang has a question, I'll go there. So Councillor Brown.
So through the chair, so when we're being asked for a percentage, so the things that I'm considering are on two sides. One, an $850,000 deficit, which I really feel like we're bound to address. And also on the other side of that, the numerous conversations I've had with seniors in our community and people who are on a pretty tight budget. And every percentage we raise that makes it less likely they can stay in their home or that they can afford the cost of groceries or all of the inflation in the world that's happening today. When I looked at the RDCK, a lot of the taxation, the highest rates are in Area D in Kaslo, from what I saw, of around 13%, if I'm correct. So separate of what we'll be taxing, our citizens are going to be seeing pretty significant raises regardless. And so trying to balance ensuring that they are able to afford to continue to age in our community with trying to look to the future and ensuring that we can reduce this $850,000 deficit so that we can actually get to where we need to be. Trying to find a comfortable zone in there, which is why I think we're looking for a number so we can know, is this going to be an extra $1,000 a year? Because that feels maybe very significant to some people. And so I'm certainly for doing more than 7%, so that we can start to address this in a meaningful way. My question would be, would 10%, what kind of dent would that make on the $850,000 every year? Is that so insignificant? A 3% raise where 104 is necessary, that it's almost token and not actually moving the needle? Or would a 10% start to address it in a meaningful way and help us to get on the right path? We're not doing the minimum, but we're doing more than the minimum, but perhaps in a way that might still allow our citizens to be able to, financially continue to, meet their requirements of, their homes and their happiness.
Through the chair, a 10% tax increase would bring in, roughly $80,000 in additional revenue, which helps us move towards where we need to go for that deficit. Everything else, taxation is not the only piece of the pot. All of these other things too: municipal grants, leases, user fees and charges. So what's important is in everything we do is thinking about this, what we're doing right now, and being consistent over a long number of years. Not going to fix it in 1 year. And so if 7% is where staff are at right now with the budget, and that's fantastic, it just doesn't help us put money to deal with our asset. And I don't know what else to say.
So Councillor Lang, did you have any questions before I move on to someone else? No? Okay, Councillor Weaver.
I just don't really understand how, like, from 1 year to the next, we could be $850,000 as a shortfall.
That's in our asset renewal. It's not actual dollars, it's asset renewal, right? If we were to have to replace everything and do a portion of it now, that's what it would equate to. Is that correct? Is 850,000, or is that, because it was a huge, like way larger. That was a single year number, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, with the chair, $850,000 a year would be the deficit, and so
Okay.
Keep in mind, the intention might not be for us to get to eliminate that deficit entirely through taxation and user fees and lease agreements. It's probably going to include debt financing. So we're gonna come up to a project where we go, we need $4 million. We don't have $4 million to afford it. We're gonna need to borrow $4 million. And then the cost of borrowing is gonna form part of your taxation increase.
Okay.
Just thought it's worth mentioning that.
And just as an FYI, I've opened up the approved financial plan that was emailed from the regional district after the last meeting, and Area D's taxation went up 10.97% for this year, and Kaslo 7.65. We tend to flip back and forth. Their assessments are higher one year, so their taxation is higher, and then it seems the next year it goes the other way. Our tax increase was higher last year than ours was 2.25% last year. And Area E was, they were 11.61 last year. So but there's other specified services that they deliver on as well that the village doesn't participate in. That's just for all of our shared services. So, still big numbers. Further question, that 7%, does that have anything being put in reserve at all, or that's just covering the inflationary costs of all the departments, but with no reserve contribution? Minimal.
Through the chair, our reserve contributions, right, historically have been pretty meager, small, and I don't want to answer the question directly because I want to be able to play with some things.
Okay.
All I can say is at 7%, you're not putting much into your reserves. It's something has to change.
All right. Any more comments? This is just to help CAO Baker with formulating what he's going to present for us next week. Without some guidance, it's pretty hard. So 7 is what it currently is at, and I've heard Councillor Brown indicate that you were comfortable with 10. Just so we can start to work on that asset, the asset management deficit. Correct. So Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, I certainly, while recognizing what's been said earlier, if there was any way to understand what the tax implications on a homeowner would be from 7% to 10%, that would be really helpful. But the number $80,000, that's about 10% of our deficit. So it is significant, and it feels meaningful in addressing that. So I would be comfortable with that, with the caveat of I would like to understand what that means to somebody's final tax bill. If this is going to be thousands more, that's different than if it's going to be hundreds more or tens more. And it would be a lot more palatable to me to confidently say 10% as opposed to what I'm doing now, which is fairly hesitantly saying it, because I know it's like take your medicine. It's not something I want to do, but I know that we do need to start addressing this, and it's not going to be through any one thing. It's going to be many things that are going to help us get there. And if this could be a 10% of that, that feels meaningful to me. And if it isn't something that is going to be overly onerous or make it so that people would quite literally lose their homes or make it so they couldn't afford, the basics, then I would be in favor of that. Were it to be that case where this is so significant that people might lose their homes, I would be much more reserved, and I'd want to stay on at 7%, because ultimately I feel like our responsibility is to ensure that people can continue to live in Kaslo and, you know, like be able to do well here. If there was a way to be able to understand whether it's tens or hundreds of thousands, then I would be in favor of a 10% raise.
What's our tax rate right now for just that residential home?
I don't know what mill rate. About five, but I can't remember what our mill rate was last year. Yeah, so that's.
Because you could figure it out.
Yeah,
Multiply it by the value of the home and then add on. I'm gonna go with 9%. Even though. I know why, yeah. Just because.
so we're recognizing that 7 is.
Yeah,
Sort of where. Sort of status quo.
Yeah,
to
I'm
keep.
just,
Yeah, and then,
yeah,
well, and we can, even if we could just get the impact with what each 1% increase would
Yeah.
mean, and then we could do our own calculation.
Yeah.
Rather than you coming back and saying, if it's 8, that's 9, that's 10. So what each 1% increase would result in for additional taxation, and we can do our own math. We put it in a spreadsheet, pretty easy, but,
So you can think of just for every 1% you go up would be an additional $8,000
right,
roughly.
yeah.
Just easy numbers. Sorry if you can't hear there, Councillor Lang, just for every 1% increase, you would generate about $8,000 in additional tax revenue. Just generally speaking.
Mhm.
and yes, to do a calculation for comparison purposes. So what kind of average home value? 500,000? Probably.
That's probably low now, isn't it?
Could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah. To the chair. Will we get an opportunity to talk about staffing levels if we still need certain positions full-time or? Yeah,
Yeah, through the chair, that's a tough one, because there's definitely that gap on the public works side. And once our manager of strategic initiatives contract is over, then it would be up to the public works foreman and possibly your CAO to try to manage capital or infrastructure projects. And at this time, I don't know if it's feasible. I just know that there's definitely a gap. We need a manager overseeing infrastructure, asset management, and we don't have it right now. And I don't know what the answer is. Yeah.
All right, so you're not requiring a resolution, but have you got
I'm
enough?
curious if, Councillor Lang hasn't said anything, and maybe that's enough said. I'm just curious if Councillor Bird has anything, I just kind of made a note of what the other two councillors had mentioned. I don't know where it sits with you.
Yeah, no, through the chair, I'm kind of following the same. I'd like it to be some kind of significant. If we're gonna raise taxes and it only raises, the revenue raised hardly makes a difference, then we have to maybe find another major way to get revenue or to reduce expenses. And, some part of me thinks with this huge deficit, like, well, maybe we'll have to just end up with dirt roads again, then this is probably the same conversation that's happening all over Canada, probably all over the US as well. Like, we are trying to maintain something that we all grew up and we got used to things improving all the time. And the idea of that going backwards is, well, we can't entertain that, but, so that this whole asset management, exercise is certainly putting a spotlight on that. All of this to say is, I think if 10% is the pill that we have to put out there, then really it should be known that's so we don't go backwards. So, that's it. That's a common sense response.
So Councillor Lang, did you, I don't know whether you heard the question when CAO Baker asked it earlier about commenting on what kind of comfort level you would have, like with the 7% being basically status quo, 9% and 10% were numbers that were, there was not really comfort with, but recognizing this necessity for increases to address asset management. So just,
Yeah, through the chair. It's very difficult for me to come to grips with this situation when I have no paperwork in front of me. 7% would probably be my upper limit, the max I'd be willing to go. But I think there's other things we can do to reduce the burden. But we really need to you know, get the budget in front of us and start going through it line item by line item. I don't think we've really done that yet, have we?
Not the way it was usually done
no.
in the past. Yeah, that's what I was getting at as well. The way we've kind of done it in the past, we did that. We went through everything line by line in each department and decided what we needed to keep and what we didn't. But it's a different approach.
But I think also recognizing there are some line items that we really can't, can't move on.
No.
We can't move on.
Yeah.
You know, say, oh, well, we've agreed to a 3%
Yeah.
increase here for staffing, but okay, we're only gonna give them 1.5. That doesn't work, right? There are some areas where we have no influence on and no control other than what actions we've already taken or that are being imposed on us. Some of them are just built in.
Yeah.
And, we don't have anywhere that we can move. And I did go back and watch the meeting from last week. That was tedious. I could see what you meant about the regional district meeting. Your impression of the regional district meeting that you attended. I watched it back to see
Oh, yeah.
what happened. But that was, yeah. No, it was interesting to see. I think, yeah, some of the decisions.
I can't hear anything you're saying.
Oh,
The volume's completely gone.
okay. All right. Anyhow, yeah. So we just, I don't want us to go down that same rabbit hole where we're digging ourselves into a hole by decisions we're making, short-sighted decisions we're making in one year, which may compound in a subsequent year. You know, trying to reduce taxation to the bare minimum for 1 year, and it could have worse impacts in subsequent years, and there's nowhere left to hide. So, all right. So I think then that brings us to the end of our meeting, and we're at 5 to 9. So I'll have to do a motion to adjourn at 8:54, moved by Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Okay, motion is carried.
Yes.